I think we'll get started then. Um, Real quick, I just want to start off by doing some quick introductions. And so I'll kick it off and sort of also like maybe characterize sort of what we're here for today. But before we begin, I just wanted to say that I think if it's okay with everyone on the panel, we're going to try and shoot for right around an hour. So hopefully at the end, there'll be a little bit of time to field any questions that are in the chat. For the attendees, obviously, I know that you can't speak on the webinar, but if you have questions throughout, please put them in the chat, and then we'll try to address a few at the end. Any of which we probably missed throughout our discussion, sort of our free flow back and forth. So before I hand it over to the panelists here, I just want to say thank you to you three. I know it's quite a bit of a carve out. I know it's already been a long day and it's probably very busy where you're at. So thank you so much. I know here at Service to School we appreciate it a lot, and the attendees are going to get a lot out of it. So I'll start off just by doing a really quick run through of me. I'm Bob Atkinson. I'm currently the alumni program manager at Service to School. A lot of what I'm doing is outreach to students that are prior enlisted veterans that have already gotten into an undergraduate institution. So a lot of that entails not only outreach in terms of opportunities that we see, on the private side, but also looking at opportunities academically, such as scholarships, funding opportunities, and then just resources in general for veterans at undergraduate institutions. So really love it. Been doing it for about a year now. And I also used Service to School when I was applying to Yale for my undergrad. So it's been full circle and it's been really rewarding. But I'm Bob Atkinson. That's what I'm doing. That's really the relevance of why I'm here today. However, currently I'm studying at Oxford. I'm doing an MPhil. I'm there on a Marshall Scholarship. Um, and I just finished my first year. I'm going to be going back in October. Currently studying social and public policy there, which has been really cool. It's been a total huge adjustment moving to the UK and living overseas in a way that isn't like deployed military-esque. So it's been really cool. Prior to that, and I think hopefully I can shed a little bit of light on my past experiences. The summer after my junior year, I was a summer business analyst at McKinsey, and I'm actually going to be going back there once I'm done with my time at Oxford. I loved my time there. Hopefully, at the end, I'll be able to maybe provide a little bit of context or answer some questions for any of the attendees here today. But before I pass it over to the panelists to do some quick introductions, I just want to say, like, hopefully what we're able to accomplish today is just characterizing both the process and the timeline for undergraduate recruiting at institutions at all three that are here today. But also I'd like to also talk a little bit about what consulting is broadly and the way that it's done at each of your respective firms. So hopefully we're able to do that and just sort of yeah, color what is sort of a nebulous topic, I think, for a lot of undergraduates that have come out of like a military background. So I'll pass it over. I don't know if Sarah, if you'd be willing to go first, but that'd be great. So again, thank you so much for being here, and looking forward to the chat today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bob. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah McKenna, and I work for Boston Consulting Group. I sit in our Boston office, and I've been here for almost 4 years. My role at BCG is targeting mainly associate candidates, so undergraduates and non-MBA master's students. We actually just had our first SUM-A drop, or summer associate internship drop, this past Monday, so it's been a little busy. But while I do sit in the Boston office, I oversee our Great Lakes campuses. So majority, Northwestern, University of Chicago, all of those schools. But I'm happy to answer any questions today, and I'm excited to hopefully make things a little bit more clear about BCG and just to give a little bit more insight into what we do as a firm and different things that we're always looking for from candidates, and eager to talk about veterans at BCG because it is something that our BCGers and consultants are very, very passionate about, and we are trying to open that a little bit more. So excited to hear from you guys. I don't know if you want me to popcorn it over to
Yeah,
someone. Mark?
Marissa, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Marissa. I'm a senior recruiter at L.E.K Consulting. I am based in our Boston office, and I recruit our undergraduate student population for our Boston, New York, and Atlanta offices. I also help oversee our US-wide associate recruiting pipeline. So I support our more junior recruiters in Chicago, Houston, LA, endeavors. I primarily focus on our East Coast schools and have been with the firm for a little over 3 years. We'll hand it over.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ricky Lucan. I am based in McKinsey's Detroit office, but ever since I rejoined the firm in May of 2021, I do the recruiting for our St. Louis office, and then I'm responsible for global recruiting for Washington University in St. Louis. I like to say, though, too, I have 16 years cumulative at the firm, but that's over several different decades. So I started in our Minneapolis office, spent time in New York and Chicago, did some recruiting at another organization for a while, and spent 12 years as a stay-at-home mom. I never planned to come back to McKinsey, but once you build relationships here, they never quite die. And so I had moved to Detroit with our family, and in a LinkedIn post, one of my former colleagues was like, "Hey, I'm transferring from DC back to Detroit." And I reached out and I said, "We're going to have to get together for coffee or cocktails." And within 15 minutes, we were on the phone. And 5 weeks later, I had an offer to return to the firm. So things happen. And I will just say, regardless of kind of which firm you're talking about, it's about relationships. And so I personally believe there's not a right or wrong with any of our organizations. This is definitely the opportunity. There's nuances for each, but everyone can find the right home for them.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much to all three of you. I think, and also really briefly, I actually interned at the Minneapolis office. So I'm from Minnesota. So cool. Really, really awesome. Interesting. Um, I think it might be helpful to start out just by if we could maybe go in the same order by just doing like a quick overview of what each of your respective firms, like what exactly consulting is and sort of, how it varies across different disciplines within each of the firms. And then if you wouldn't mind, I sort of noticed this as we were talking, it may be helpful for the attendees to distinguish between what an associate is and what an analyst is at each firm, because I know the naming is a little bit different and that can get confusing. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I would really appreciate it. So I don't know, Sarah, if you're okay with going first on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like these answers might be a little similar, just because, we are pretty aligned. But BCG so we're a consulting firm. We're known for strategic thinking and innovative solutions. I think one thing that will be helpful just for those on the line is to think of kind of what makes our firm and what we look for in different candidates. So we're always looking for really curious people that are eager to learn a lot of different things. At BCG, you're kind of thrown in there on day one, and we think that you learn best when you're put on different cases. And so, even if you start as an intern at BCG, you are on a case with the team, and you have a line manager and colleagues. So really thrown in on day one. And we have, for our associate roles, we have summer internship roles. So those are for interns that would come in and, still hit the ground running and join a case. And usually you'd be with us for about 3 months in the summer. And then we also have our full-time associate roles. So that would be, those seniors who are looking to graduate and join BCG full-time. What else can I say about BCG? Like I said, we're always looking for individuals that are naturally curious. I think one thing that, we at BCG tend to look at is like different majors. I think sometimes, and I'm sure others feel the same way, but students feel like they have to be a certain major or they have to be a STEM major, a math major. But I've worked with so many different BCGers here that we're writing majors or something totally different, and it's not what you did in your undergrad but what you learned, how you can grow from it, different skill sets, but really your skill sets are learned at BCG. And so, if you have no knowledge of Excel, that's totally fine, and you'll learn it with your team. So that's kind of like a quick little snapshot of kind of where we are, who are the people that we look for. And yeah, I would say that's quick little snapshot.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what Sarah said. So at L.E.K, we are a pure strategy consulting firm. We have about 27 offices worldwide, 7 of those in the US with a little over 2,100 staff. We work across 5 primary sectors. So those are healthcare, industrials, financial services, consumer, TMT, and a lot of sectors have many subsectors. So one thing that's unique about L.E.K is when you start with us as a full-time or summer associate, which very similar programming we offer as Sarah mentioned at BCG. You'll come in as a generalist, so you have the opportunity to explore all of these different sectors. And another nice thing about the firm is regardless of your office location, you're still getting exposure to all of these different sectors with opportunities to dedicate and specialize, starting really at the 6-month mark at the firm. We focus on a couple of key case types. So like pure strategy cases, mergers and acquisitions. We have an organization and performance service line, which is more of the implementation side of things rather than the strategy side of things, as well as a digital service line. So a lot of opportunities for exploration and learning more about different types of industries.
I could almost say ditto, but different. It's kind of like it's a depend. So I will start with business analyst is the role for undergrads or non-MBAs with 4 years or less work experience. Not to offend anybody, but we do not consider military work as work experience because we're looking for like professional, like industry work. And then associate is a term that we use for folks that are coming from their MBA or what we call advanced and professional degree, which are PhDs, MDs, and JDs. McKinsey is, when I first joined, was about 3,000 consultants globally. We are now 26,000 consultants globally, but then an additional nearly 20,000 professionals from IT to recruiting to everything in between, because we have a lot of different service lines. So any, I'm going to say verticals as far as industries or functional areas, we probably touch them. We are 99 years old. We're actually getting ready to celebrate 100 years next year. We keep being teased that it's going to be a big deal, but nobody knows any details. So we're like, that year's half there. Like, what are we going to be doing? But it's really exciting to, go into our 2nd century. With still growing, still expanding, and attracting people that are still intellectually curious, very team-oriented, and trying to make a lasting impact in the world.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I know that there's probably going to be a lot of overlap for some of these questions, so definitely feel free to say ditto. But I think you all touched on it briefly, but one thing I'd like to dig into maybe a little more at a more micro level is when applicants are applying for either a summer internship or a full-time role, there's phases. There's the submission of the resume and all the things that goes with that. For some firms, there's high reviews, for some there is not. But then there's the actual interviews themselves, whether that's doing more of your personal side and the case side. So if you wouldn't mind, I don't know if it would be helpful to break it down that way, but if possible, could you speak a little bit more about what you're looking for initially in an applicant when you're trying to recruit? And if there's anything specific that applies to veterans, please feel free to address that. Thank you.
I can start us off again. I think the main thing that we look for is people that are quick on their feet and can think on the spot. I think obviously with the interview process, it can be so intimidating. And it's hard, and we all realize that and totally understand that. But trying to be adaptive in that new environment and being as professional as possible. One thing that we always say is like, do you think they'd be a good fit at BCG? Would we feel comfortable putting them in front of a managing director and partner, and will they present themselves well? And so I think, kind of being adaptable, having a little bit of tenacity, and I think in specific to veterans, I think that's like a great thing that they might have an advantage over. You guys might be calm under pressure and able to be comfortable in a new learning environment. So I think that's something that definitely would work in your favor. obviously from like an academic standpoint, it is helpful to know your stuff, to be prepared, and to just go in it as confident as possible, but also asking really good questions. I think in the interview process at BCG too, it's so easy to, maybe not get to the solution that's needed if you're like in a case, but asking the right questions along the way is one thing that goes really far. And I've seen I've seen a lot of people who during their case, they were like, I didn't get to the correct solution. And now they work at BCG and have been here for many years. And that's always something that they then tell candidates who are in your position, that they also had a hard time with casing. And even though you might not get to that exact solution, asking the right questions along the way really can drive things forward. So showing that you're understanding the process and just being confident that it's okay to ask questions along the way is something that really does make a difference, at least at BCG in the process. And then I think one other thing too that veterans have sometimes that other undergrads don't have is just that maturity. And I think, so many times when we have like different feedback forms, they say like, oh, they're a little bit quieter, or they're a little bit more reserved. But I think sometimes, veterans do have a little bit more maturity and a little bit more confidence going into it, which really can go a long way in comparison to all the other applicants that we're seeing.
I absolutely agree with everything Sarah said in terms of, and I can break down like application, interview, and how we look at candidates differently. So in terms of your application, we're looking for, research and analytical skills, any type of leadership or management skills, which we've found a lot of our current veteran staff have. So that is definitely something that seems to come easier or more natural to veterans during that application and even interview process. And then some of those softer skills that we look for are like a sense of grit, a sense of humility, again, which most veterans do have. So it's you are already, set up for success in that regard with your previous experiences. And then I think when we're going throughout the interview process, it's really showcasing, your personal brand and articulating your thought process as you're thinking through solving a problem. So to Sarah's point, it's not necessarily about getting to the right answer that the interviewer has on their case prompt, but really being able to explain your thought process throughout the interview and helping your interviewer understand how you're thinking creatively or how you're solving that problem.
I'll say and or add just like ditto to both things that they said, because it is about problem solving and teamwork and, the drive and initiative that someone has, because we also know all of those things translate. If there's evidence of it prior, there's going to be success in that same way in the future, right? It's a predictor. We also at McKinsey, we do case interviews for all of our interviews, but we also have a component that's called personal experience interview, or PEI. And that's actually an area that a lot of vets do excel because they've done amazing things and had significant impact. And so, but those give you the opportunity to talk through it. Now, during the case time, it is an interviewer led. So it is definitely back and forth. And it's a lot about, again, articulating your thought process. It's not about being perfect in an answer. I've been in lots of decision meetings where people will be like, well, they were off by 10x. However, they were able to talk me through how they got to that place. And there was logic to it, so we know people are also going to make math mistakes or that sort of thing. But if you can't get through and articulate why you're thinking that way, or how you're, coming up with 2 + 2 = 6, we know that's not going to happen. But if you cannot articulate it, then that's kind of the thing that most people have issues with or challenges with as the interview process is happening.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And maybe, I don't know if before we move on, if Marissa and Sarah, if you might be willing to speak on, the actual interview itself, perhaps at the end of your process. I think that might be helpful to compare and contrast, if you don't mind.
Sure. So our associate and summer associate interviews are very similar. So we have 2 rounds of interviews. All interviews are case interviews with behavioral components. So your first round of interviews is 2 30-minute cases. Each are a combination of strategy and quant cases with those behavioral questions as well. And then should you move to final rounds, that is 3 30-minute case interviews. 2 of those are, again, the strategy and quant component with behavioral questions. As well as a business logic case, which is essentially testing your business acumen. So more focused on the strategy side of solving a case. So good to be prepared for both the case component as well as the behavioral component going into interviews.
Yeah, and honestly, to go off that, it's pretty similar in process wise. So we have a behavioral component, which is our first round interview. And that's more of, making sure that you're a good fit for BCG, those type of questions. And then, and also making sure that you're a good fit for BCG as much as BCG would be a good fit for yourself. I think that's another really important piece. So trying to figure that out in the behavioral interview. And then our second round interview is 2 45-minute case interviews. That's all done virtually, but it is 1-to-1. So you'd be interviewing with one BCGer for both interviews.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And perhaps it might be helpful to zoom out a little bit. And I do have a question. It's definitely firm specific, but in terms of how each of your firms distinguishes between industry verticals and functions. And I think that might be a little bit important here, only because I know, Marissa, you brought up strategy, and obviously I think that there's more there's more generalist firms that do more than only strategy studies. So it may be helpful to explain the difference between strategy and perhaps like more of an implementation operations type of a focus, I guess, within the functions. And if you don't mind speaking a little bit on when a new analyst or a new associate comes to your firms, sort of the ability to do the random walk and bounce between different industries. I think that is something that isn't as advertised as it may seem. So I don't know if you'd be willing to speak on that in any order, Marissa, Sarah.
Go ahead, Marissa.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So at L.E.K, we are primarily focused on strategy. So when I think about strategy cases, like what new products should our clients go into, or what do our consumer segments look like? So like classic growth strategy type cases. And then we also have components where we'll be working on mergers and acquisitions. So when companies are being bought and sold. And then we also have like a robust data and analytics team, which really has their own service line and focus, but also spans across all the different sectors. And then in terms of like the actual implementation, which is a smaller part of our firm, it's called the organization and performance service line or practice. And that's really like supply chain optimization or something related to workforce. And then I think the second part of your question was how do associates move between industries? So one thing that we do at L.E.K is you'll spend 6 months focused in one specific industry. You are placed into that industry by our staffing team. However, you are submitting your, industry preferences to their team. So you'll spend 6 months in an industry. So really taking that deep dive into the different types of clients that industry might see. You'll have a cohort of other generalist associates, consultants, also learning about that industry, as well as getting to know the consulting staff that are already dedicated. And then after that 6-month mark, you can either apply to dedicate to that sector or resubmit your sector preferences and go through another rotation and take that next 6-month deep dive. So it's not too much of like going back and forth between industries, but because we are a peer strategy firm, you are getting a lot of case reps. So cases are anywhere from like 3 to 6 weeks. So much shorter in duration than other firms.
Yeah. And then to just echo off that, there's a lot of similarities between BCG's staffing model, practice areas, and all of that. We do hold cases a little bit longer though. So usually you're on a case from anywhere from like 3 to 6 months. And a lot of times you will co-locate to where your team is working. Another thing is we do, as much as possible, try to prioritize different practice areas that students have or new joiners have mentioned that they want to be part of. So I think a big one that a lot of people coming in are super interested in is social impact work. Even though you might not be able to do that the very first go around, it's a continual conversation with your line manager and your staffing managers to help get you aligned on that path. I think another thing too is, like other firms, we have so many offices, and I think sometimes undergrads think that you have to apply to certain offices in order to do that certain practice area. And that's one thing that we try to continue to say is not the case. Again, we follow a regional staffing model, so you're able to do a lot of different casework and touch a lot of different practice areas in all offices. And you shouldn't feel like you have to apply to the New York office or the Boston office or, certain offices to do certain work. But I will caveat one thing: if you are interested in changing offices at all, because maybe you really feel like the social impact work is in a certain office, we do try to keep you in your office for at least 1 to 2 years before you try to co-locate. So something to keep top of mind too, because again, I think sometimes when students are in the offer process, when they're thinking of their office preferences, that's like the decision maker for their practice areas that they want to go into. And then it kind of comes back on them when they realize that they can't just change into a different office after 3 months. So something to remember about that as well.
Yeah, I will definitely pile on with the office. I will always tell a student, select an office when you're applying by where you want to live outside of work. The office itself and the work is going to change. It's going to be different. We also have a regional staffing model, and your staffing, our business analysts come in to be generalists. And so you can do everything, a financial to then a marketing to then a supply chain, and it could be in various places in the country with various teams. When you get to that 2-year mark, that's when it's kind of like, what, I've really either found my people that you like to work with and then the industry, or you're like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done is within the digital area. But we want people to have that opportunity to try a lot of different things to then figure out what they want to do and go forward. So again, I'll still say choose an office by where you want to live outside of work, not by the work you think you're going to do, or not by I'll pick on my poor friends in Cleveland. It's easier to get an offer in Cleveland or Pittsburgh or wherever. It's not. And I'm sure my counterparts here, the bar is the same. So whether you're in New York or in the Bay or Dallas or whatever, St. Louis, if you have to be able to be performing during those interviews at a particular level to get an offer. So it's not easier or harder in any one location.
Thank you so much for reading my mind, because that was actually the next question that you all addressed it that I was going to ask, was specifically about applying to offices. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna reiterate that one more time, only because I think that is something that is often missed, and it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. So for instance, and in case there's any, I don't know if it was misunderstood at all, if you're applying, for instance, let's say that you get into a summer internship at any of these firms, you do your summer internship, you did great, and you receive a return offer. You're receiving a return offer to come back to the office that you did an internship at, and that's critical. It's not that you're doing an internship in, I'll use Minneapolis, for example, and then it goes well. You're not going to have the ability to say, well, I want to go to the New York office now. And I feel like that happens very often across all firms. And that's super helpful advice. So thank you so much for bringing that up. But hopefully that's very helpful. If we can go back briefly, going back to the interviews and the application process, before we get into to each of your respective timelines, one thing I wanted to ask about was resources. For applicants that, oftentimes applicants, especially ones that are not majoring in economics or aren't in some consulting club at their school, they ask for resources to prepare for the case interview, or the personal experience at each respective firm. Do you have any advice for online resources or any other resources that may help applicants that are interested in applying for a cycle?
I can go first. I think one thing that is probably the most general answer, and not to be general, but it's always a best practice, is just emailing our associate inbox. So we have an inbox, associate.recruiting@bcg.com. And like I said, there's a lot of BCGers who are part of veterans at BCG, and they want to make connections and try to help candidates as much as possible. So the first thing that I would say is always connect with us, and we can make the connection to different veterans at BCG, and you can continue a conversation there. I think another thing, which is always a helpful resource, is to check our campus website for updates on virtual events that are happening or on-campus events. For virtual events happening, in the meantime, and I know I don't want to get ahead of the recruiting timelines, but we have recruiter office hours, which are great to go through frequently asked questions and things to think about and consider ahead of the application drops. We also have something called BCG Launch, which is an undergraduate and non-MBA master's program, which just gives you a lot of different resources and materials into case prep materials, general information to learn more about BCG, all of our offices. So I think that's another thing that you can just get a lot of different resources to help you prepare for the BCG process as well. And I'd say those are probably my top three.
I would echo that exactly. I recommend reaching out to our general recruiting email, or happy to provide my email as well. We have a Vets with Impact employee resource group here, and they are always willing to have a coffee chat and connect. So if you would like that connection, we're happy to make it. Also have a lot of virtual events listed on our website, and most of those virtual events are followed up with a virtual coffee chat invite as well. So you're welcome to utilize that too. It might not be a coffee chat with a veteran, but it is a coffee chat with an associate to learn more about the day-to-day at L.E.K and what that role looks like, and really picking their brain about anything that you would find helpful. And then we also have an interview prep resources page on our website. And I think just in general too, outside of like what L.E.K specifically offers, resources for veterans, become part of clubs on campus, whether that's a business club or a consulting club, get to know other people that might be going into consulting. You can practice casing with them. And it kind of all comes full circle with what we were talking about with interview prep and really practicing articulating your thought process and having a person that has a mutual interest, or even if they're not going into consulting, but someone that you can practice with. So I think joining consulting clubs or business clubs on campus is also a really good resource for you as you're prepping for the application and interview process.
And I'm also going to recommend one step earlier is y'all are going to school, you're going to have career services. Not all career services are created equal. I will absolutely definitely say that because I work with a lot across the US and they're not all the same. However, it's part of your tuition. Utilize them. I am partial right now to the folks that are at WashU because they work with all the employers. They're really fantastic. And if I'm talking with a candidate, it's one of the first things I ask is go to career services, not only for the resume review, but casing. Then they have a plethora of information as well, or can connect you with people. Again, whether you're an engineering major who's now interested in consulting, so you haven't been in the business school, and they just have a lot of resources. In addition to that, for us, our careers page on McKinsey.com, each school, you can look up your school, and then we have just a plethora of things we've hosting or have hosted, because we are wrapping up, as Sarah was saying, one of our deadlines is next week for resumes. And then so we're kind of at the tail end of it, but in the spring when we're doing recruiting, we do host resume workshops. We host case prep. We do a lot of things that we try to, but they're also on our websites, and so sometimes, and we try to communicate them and publicize them and put them out on 1220 or Handshake or whatever your school uses. But it's always astonishing to me that somebody will come to me in November who's a senior and be like, I'm interested in consulting. I'd like to apply. And I have to say, like, we're already done. Like, good luck to you. And I've been on campus all year long. Where have you been? Like, it's surprising. So utilize the resources that are there, but also do a little bit of your own research on kind of what is out there. I mean, in this day and age, there's a plethora of information about the organizations and also about how to prepare for consulting interviews.
Also, sorry, Bob, not to interrupt, just to reiterate what Ricky said, to definitely use your career services team. They are amazing. And again, to Ricky's point, they're not all the same, but if you're interested in consulting, they know the right things to look for, they know how to shape your resume. But if you haven't heard it from us, they're also aware of our deadlines and then can get you prepared so you're not, that person coming in saying you're interested in consulting and then unfortunately all the deadlines have passed. So use them to your advantage because they are great. And usually at most of the campuses I go to, they will host a consulting ramp up session to get you prepared for deadlines to come and different things to look for and watch for and certain reminders there. So I am all for going to career services as a first stop because that they are always usually a great resource that you have.
Totally agree with everything said. And I would just reiterate two quick things. One, if your school has a consulting club, definitely partake in it. And I think not only will you learn a lot of the tools that are going to help you in the interview process, but you'll learn about what consulting is. And chances are there's somebody in the club that already did an internship, and you can learn a lot about the process from them. So there's so much intangible benefit that comes from it. The second thing I would say is use online resources on each respective firm's site, because I think that when in doubt, go to that, because these are the people that are going to be, looking at your application, and they know what the case is, and they're making the cases. So I do think that sometimes when you branch too far out away from the firms or away from consulting clubs in general, the information can be misleading sometimes. Not all of it is going to be as grounded in the truth as it can be. And I mean, there's a lot of like for-profit sites that try to prepare people for the interview process that I wouldn't go to first. I would use your free resources that are more connected in the process. Anywho, I do want to keep it moving a little bit. I think this would be a perfect time to maybe talk about the actual timeline. And if each of you could just sort of touch base on that. And before you even go, I would just say a key to the timeline is like obviously write down what each of the panelists are going to say, and it's online anyway. But also just plan. Have when it's going to start, so start preparing early because the timeline comes up quickly. So with that being said, I'll pass it on to whoever wants to go first.
I can start if we want to just continue to go in the same order here. So as I mentioned for our internship deadlines, we have two deadlines. Our first one just dropped this past Monday. So June 23rd was our first summer associate internship deadline. We also will have a second deadline for our internship roles, which is September 3rd. So later in the summer. And that is, the deadlines are always at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So it is crucial to get your application in before that. A minute later, unfortunately, we will not be able to look at. So those are our internship deadlines. And then our full-time deadline, we just have one, which is July 14th. So those are our three deadlines. Like I said, they are all at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And you will have different materials that will be required as part of your application. You'll have your application, which will ask your office preferences and things like that. You'll also have to upload your resume, transcripts. Cover letters are always optional, not mandatory. But again, always use your career services team to review those things ahead of submitting your application. And then I would say just a commonly asked question that we get a lot is, when can I expect to hear back? So for those applications, they're not rolling. So for example, if you did apply to our June 23rd deadline on Monday, you can expect to hear back with a notification if you are making it to the first round interview about 2 to 3 weeks after. So that is important as well, because I know folks get eager and are asking like, when am I going to hear back? I just applied. So that is key as well. And then we do have an assessment that comes 24 to 48 hours after you submit your resume. It's called a CCA, which is a career consulting assessment. So I think, as you are getting ready, and if you do apply to BCG, it's always important to just stay on top of your email because we're always sending reminders or next steps. So those are kind of where things are with the application timeline and when to expect to hear back. And then a couple of different factors that are included as part of the application process. And then you can only apply to one deadline. That's another big one. So if you apply to the June 23rd deadline, you unfortunately are not able to apply to that second deadline.
Great. So for L.E.K, our full-time associate application for an August or October 2026 start date opens tomorrow. Applications are rolling, so we will begin reviewing applications within the next week or so. However, we won't start inviting candidates to interview until about the first week of August, and we'll continue interviews through early September. Our application deadline for our full-time associate role is August 18th. Both the application will open at midnight tomorrow or tonight. And then deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern as well. And similar to what Sarah said, is we are not able to consider applications after that deadline. And our summer associate application opens in mid-August on August 15th and closes on September 15th. And those applications are not rolling, so we will review candidates following the application deadline, and you can expect to receive an invite to an interview if you are selected about 2 to 3 weeks after your application is submitted, or after the deadline, excuse me.
So our first deadline that's coming up is for our full-time business analysts. So anybody that's graduating between December 2025 and August of 2026. And that deadline is Thursday, July 10th. And then our summer business analysts, which would be rising juniors if you're graduating between December 2026 and August of 2027. And that deadline is Thursday, the 17th. So they're about a week apart. Typically, it is about 2 to 3 weeks that you would hear back from us on a decision. And after that, typically it's so loose, like typical, normal, standard. None of those really apply in consulting. But then about 3 to 4 weeks later would be your first round interviews. And that is all dependent on the office that you are selected to interview with. So when you interview, or when you apply to McKinsey, you get you have 3 office choices that you're allowed to choose from. You do not have to choose 3, but you're given like 60 points to put towards those offices. So if Bob was all in for Minneapolis, he could have put 60 points to Minneapolis, and we would have known then as we're reviewing it, okay, whatever, he was at Yale, so the Yale recruiter reviews it, Minneapolis recruiter is going to review it, and then that's how that functions. I'm going to add a little tidbit too. We do not use AI for any of our reviews, so it's eyeballs on resumes for everything. Now, I'm not going to say that's never going to change, never say never, but for now, there's no AI involved. As you choose your office, when you get invited to interview with McKinsey, we're inviting you to interview, and it's for the Minneapolis office. So from the very get-go, there's no confusion. So you can't say, like, after you do get an offer, like, but I really want to be in New York. Like, no, we figured that out before. So as Sarah was saying, we need transcripts. We need your resume. I would say spend more time on your resume than you think is appropriate. It should be more time than you've spent on the most difficult, most important project that you've ever turned in for school. It is that important, and I don't think people put the time and energy into it that they should. And I'll be always honest and transparent. I can get it down to a certain number of resumes, and sometimes it gets down to where the typo is. Where is an extra space? And it is not because we're trying to be nitpicky, it's because we actually have so many qualified people, and I'm sure we all, Marissa and Sarah too, like, you have to somehow then try to make that distinguished decision between A and B or C resume. Pay attention, make sure it is as crisp and clear and, concise, saying as much as possible in as few words as possible. But it's resume. Sorry, I got off on a tangent. I always do on that one. Resume, transcripts. Again, cover letters are optional. Most of my recruiting colleagues at McKinsey will say, don't send them in because nobody's going to read them. I will personally say 80% of the time, and I've been doing recruiting a long time, I have read literally tens of thousands of resumes. Cover letters hurt more candidates than they help because they will not spend the time. I've received applications in the last year to Ricky Lucan at Ford Motor Company. No, I'm not at Ford. Or to somebody else's name at another company, and because students are not paying attention to that detail. So unless you have something really important to share, something that's an extenuating circumstance, there's no reason for us to see a cover letter.
I think, sorry, just to pile on to what Ricky said, the amount of cover letters that I have seen that are addressed to me saying they're interested in working at McKinsey is too common. So definitely think about if you really need a cover letter, because I agree, sometimes it can hurt you more than it can help you.
Yep. Lack of attention to detail on that one, right, Sarah? We'll have to compare notes on that. But
I will say too, I didn't go over our application requirements, which I'll go over right now. But we definitely notice a lot of mistakes coming through on the cover letter. It is something we are requiring. It's potentially changing, but definitely for L.E.K, attention to detail, as Ricky mentioned, is really important. Company name is very important. Person you're addressing it to is very important. In terms of our application requirements, resume, like I said, cover letter, your transcript, you're also able to indicate your top 2 office preferences. Our process for office decision is a little bit different. So you'll go into first rounds, not necessarily going into a specific office first round, but ahead of your final rounds, you'll know which office you're being considered for. If it isn't your first choice office, then we will let you know and give you the option to be considered for one of our other offices where we have capacity in, or if you'd like to no longer continue in the interview process, that's an option too, if you're very office specific.
Awesome. Well, Ricky, Marissa, and Sarah have been so amazing at this that the timing is almost perfect right now. So we have 10 minutes left. Um, we do have one question in the chat, but any attendees, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll try and get as many as we can in the last 10 minutes here. The one that is in the chat, are there opportunities for engineers in consulting? So we touched on that earlier. I believe that we had spoken about how, having there isn't one major that's preferred to another, and regardless of what your major is, you can apply. You can apply to an internship or a full-time position at each of your firms. But if y'all would like to touch on that again, by all means, or if maybe one of you does, that would be great. And I don't know if this is relevant. I am speaking to the perfect people to answer this. But maybe if there's any like expert positions, if that's something that is worth touching on. I don't know, but there are roles that are not consulting roles that you can apply for, but that's a little bit different. I'll pause there if anyone wants to field that.
Yeah, I can answer that. We definitely would welcome an engineering student to apply to any of our positions, whether that's on the consulting side or for us, the core services side. So that might be not necessarily marketing is of interest, but just to give you an idea of what core services is. So that could be like IT, data and analytics, HR. So there are other options besides a consulting role at consulting companies. For us at L.E.K, we are looking at candidates holistically and their applications holistically. So we're not picking out specific majors, specific experiences. We're really looking at the candidate as a whole. What are they going to contribute to case teams? And honestly, it's great if you have more of a non-traditional background because you're bringing a different perspective to your case teams, which is something that we are looking for as we're hand-picking our next associate class to start at the firm.
And just to echo off of what Marissa said, we also have many different roles at BCG that aren't consulting. I know Marissa said that they call it the core team, I think. We call it the business services teams. Was that right, Marissa? Sorry.
Core services, yeah. Close enough. Yeah.
So very similar. Basically, it's like aside from consulting, everything else is bucketed into our business services team. But obviously, I'm a recruiter specifically for the consulting roles, and engineering majors are always looked at and seen. But agreed, we don't discriminate any type of major because everything is looked at and there's a lot of different factors that are going into it. So nothing to be worried about if you feel like your major doesn't fit into a bucket, because there's no one correct major when you are looking at roles at BCG.
Yeah, I'm just going to say ditto to all of that. So we have a lot of different pathways. And also, again, whether it's engineering, I mean, I have an architect major as a business analyst in our St. Louis office, and another one who's a history major. So it's not necessarily about the major. And I think that's one of the things that's also confusing or not clear is it's not your major that we're hiring you for. Actually, it's your capabilities at that analytic and quantitative. It's not that you're a mechanical engineer or that you're a finance major. Because some of the finance majors end up going to do healthcare consulting within us. So it's not always a direct apples to apples comparison.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to start picking a couple of random ones here. So one question is, hi, Sarah, quick clarification. When you mention that feedback forms sometimes say vets are quiet, is that typically viewed as negative, like lacking engagement? And can it also be interpreted as maturity?
Yes. So to clarify, I was actually saying that other candidates are usually a little bit more quiet or reserved, whereas that's a place where the veterans kind of excel, is like having the confidence, being able to speak up and being more mature than some of these candidates who are a little bit more shy and not as willing to ask questions or come off mute. But with veterans, we really do see that they really thrive in that area of, taking ownership of the conversation rather than like sitting back and letting others do the talking for them, kind of like natural born leaders.
Awesome. Great. I have another question here. So it says, thank you for hosting this. What do you look for in undergrad extracurricular activities? And maybe as an improv here, are extracurricular activities valued?
I think absolutely. As many of us have mentioned, your resume is a huge thing that we're looking at and seeing. And I know at BCG, we are looking at a lot of qualitative things, but also quantitative things. So when we are reviewing your resume, it's great to see that you're involved on campus and have extracurriculars. I think obviously it's great to see if you're part of different consulting groups at BCG or on campus, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be. It's more so seeing that you're choosing different student orgs that you're very passionate about and that you've been with for a little bit, and seeing you grow with those student orgs and have positions of leadership is always really big for us. And so not necessarily having that consulting experience within student orgs, but just having experience being involved on campus goes a long way.
All of our team structure all of our structure is team based at McKinsey. So it doesn't matter what the extracurricular is, it's evidence again that you can get along with others. You can play nice in the sandbox. You don't throw the sand. But it's also not just teamwork that we're looking for as well. It's leadership. So we also want to see that you've, taken things and moved things forward and have had impact. Not everybody can be the president of the consulting club. We get that. So we don't expect to see, 10 people listing that as their role in their extracurricular, but that doesn't mean you're not also still having impact. So you can quantify it and qualify it in a lot of different ways.
I agree with everything both of you said. That's pretty on par with L.E.K as well.
Perfect. Awesome. So I see one here. Okay, so this is a very specific question that pertains to if a student is planning to transfer as a junior in the fall of 2026 from a community college. Once they get their acceptance letter and know they're attending said institution, can they start applying to internships right away to avoid missing deadlines? And I think another way to just frame this probably is: are there windows when you can apply, and are the windows always open? Generally, I would say. And then also, are the requirements for where you are academically flexible? Maybe that's another way to view it.
For McKinsey and Company, they are not. We don't do it on a rolling basis. They are the hard deadlines. We open our applications typically in June 1st. It kind of is flexible. So that's why I said, again, June 1st. And then the deadlines, like I said, are July 10th and July 17th for our business analysts and summer business analysts respectively. So if somebody's like, hey, I know where I'm at now, I'm really excited, it's October, and you apply for the internship from us, you're going to get a letter that says, yeah, just wait, you got to get to next spring/summer and you can apply then. Now, that doesn't mean you can't still engage with us and attend all of the various things virtually as well as on campus that you could be involved with. But it is a pretty short window and time frame for people to have from applications open to then deadline.
And same goes for BCG.
Yeah, same for L.E.K. I would honestly make yourself, an Excel sheet to kind of keep track of general time frame of deadlines. But to Ricky's point, even if you miss a deadline or it's far away, please still engage with us. We'd love to still chat and connect you with a team member on the consulting side. And that, I think, just helps networking for you as you then go into a future recruitment cycle with us.
Awesome. And I think we have time for one more. So I'm going to adjust this question a little bit to be a little bit more broad. But for each of you, what sort of characteristics and traits do you see in successful applicants? And same thing goes for maybe unsuccessful as well. What sort of things hold constant?
I can go first. I think the biggest thing is being a team player, having that curiosity and being adaptable. I mean, you're on a lot of different cases, you're working with a lot of different people with a lot of different personalities. So being able to be adaptable is huge. Team player, passionate, curious, those are all kind of the biggest ones that I would say make a strong candidate. And then I think on the opposite side of that, things that maybe don't make a candidate as strong is being afraid to speak up, being afraid to ask questions, kind of suffering in silence and not allowing yourself to ask questions if you don't know, if you're not sure of an answer. And, if you're not a team player and you're not hardworking, I just don't think you'd be the right fit, and probably wouldn't love it or make it BCG.
I'm also going to add to that, there's a comfort with ambiguity that I think you have to be successful in consulting. And that doesn't mean you don't necessarily know the answers, but it's that you have to be comfortable that things shift and it changes. And what you thought was going to happen 2 weeks from now is not. What happens on the team changes. And you have to be able to just pivot and adjust and be okay with that. It can be the fun side. It's the blessing and the curse, I would say, of consulting, right? Sometimes it's really cool when things kind of change and they can be ambiguous, and sometimes it's just the nightmare. I would actually say the other thing that as a characteristic, I think there is a perception that when people interview with McKinsey, they'll come in and be like, arrogant, thinking that that's how a consultant's going to be. And it's truly the opposite of what we are like. I work with some of the most kind people. Yes, they're smart. Yes, they're driven. Yes, they do amazing things, but they're genuinely kind. Just arrogance does not bode well here. And I'm sure it doesn't at your guys. We're people. It's a people oriented. We're not making widgets. And so if the people can't get along with others, if they can't interact with the client, that's disaster for us. So arrogance does not have a successful track record.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd add for L.E.K, both of those points that both Sarah and Ricky made, very true with us as well. And I think how collaborative you are and excited to work in a team environment, and your want and desire to learn and help others learn. We have a very big feedback growth culture. So supporting and lifting one another up. And it goes back to like the arrogance thing. I do think that there is that perception of consultants having that type of personality, but we really, as we go through the interview process, we're really looking to weed out those types of people because we want real, authentic people to join the firm.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me just piggybacking off of what you all said, I think for the attendees it might be helpful. Obviously, I only did a summer internship. It's something that I've heard constantly from people that have spent a lot of time at McKinsey, but also at BCG and L.E.K, is that and you've heard all three of them talk about, being a team player and being able to socialize and work well with others. Something I've heard from almost anyone that's done consulting is that you can be on the most difficult, study. You can be on a really difficult in terms of hours, complexity, but when you're with a good team, like that, it doesn't really matter. It makes it it's so much better when you're working with awesome people. And I think that is a critical piece of what these firms are trying to bring in. They're trying to bring in people that are going to make those awesome teams, that are going to create a really awesome work environment. And they can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that's been the review that I've heard from many others. And then the other thing that I would say is do your research and really find out if it's something that you want to do, before you apply, because I think that will make you successful. It's going to make studying for it. It's going to make doing all the practice cases so much more worthwhile, and you'll do better. And if you're actually motivated and excited to do it, it'll pay dividends, I think. But I'll pause there in case Ricky, Marissa, Sarah, if you have anything else to add on.
I agree. I would say it's agreed that it's the people and the teams that you work on. For example, we have an industrial sector and it's not the most exciting or sexiest sector, but a lot of people are drawn towards it because of the people that are part of it. And I was talking to a AC that's dedicated, and she's like, I'm on a screws case, and it's the most bizarre thing I'm learning more about screws than I ever thought I would, but it's the people that led her to dedicate and work on cases like that. So definitely echo what you were saying, Bob.
Awesome. Well, I think the questions seem to have stopped, and we're a little bit over time here, but I just want to say, first and foremost, Ricky, Marissa, Sarah, can't thank you enough for your time. I think, I've learned a lot about each of your firms, and I think this was extremely helpful for the attendees, I would have to imagine. And for the attendees, thank you for showing up. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, thank you so much to the panelists for doing this. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting. Take care.
Yes, thanks so much.
Everyone.
Bye.
Of course. Bye.